The blood was the first thing he saw. A single dark crimson thread catching the last rays of a dying Wyoming sun. It trickled from her temple, a stark line against skin gone as white as bleached bone. Rider Calloway reined his buckskin, thunder, to a sudden jarring halt. Dust, thick and gritty, swirled around them, choking the air on the desolate trail. She was just lying there, crumpled at the side of the road like a child's forgotten doll. Her burgundy traveling dress was fanned out in the dirt, a splash of dark wine against the pale earth. One of her hands, small and delicate, still gripped the splintered handle of a broken parasol. It was a picture of utter ruin. "Whoa there, boy," Ryder murmured, his voice a low rumble. He swung a long leg over the saddle, his boots hitting the hard-packed trail with a familiar thud. His spurs gave a soft, lonely jingle. The year was 1878, and this particular stretch of road, winding between Cheyenne and Laramie, was a place where decent folk tried not to linger. It was a place known for bandits, for weather that could kill you in an hour, for animals with no love for men. Danger wasn't just a possibility out here, it was the one constant companion on any journey. He moved toward her slowly, his body coiled with caution. His right hand hovered instinctively over the worn handle of his Colt revolver. 10 years, 10 hard years carving a life out of this unforgiving territory had taught Ryder Calloway one simple lesson. The most innocent-looking thing was often the deadliest trap. A damsel in distress could be bait. A dropped coin could be a distraction. But as he got closer, his eyes scanning the scrub brush and the rocks, he saw nothing. No sign of an ambush, no hidden figures waiting in the long shadows. There was just the woman, unconscious and utterly vulnerable, and the vast, empty silence of the plains. He knelt beside her, the hard-baked earth pressing into his knees. With a gentle touch, he turned her face toward him. Even with the dirt and the blood, he could see she was beautiful. Fine, delicate features, a strong line to her jaw, and rich chestnut hair that had tumbled from its pins to frame her face in soft waves. The cut on her temple wasn't deep, he judged, but he knew from experience that head wounds always bled like the devil himself. He pulled his canteen from his belt and soaked his bandana, the water cool against the rough fabric. Carefully, methodically, he cleaned the blood away from the wound, his movements surprisingly gentle for a man with such calloused hands. "Miss?" he asked, his voice low, trying not to startle her if she was on the edge of consciousness. "Miss, can you hear me?" There was no response, not a flicker of an eyelid, nothing. His gaze swept the area again. No horse, no carriage, no sign of how she'd gotten here. Just the broken parasol and, a few feet away, a small, respectable-looking carpet bag. Someone had left her here, left her for dead on this lonely road, with the sun bleeding out of the sky and the cold of a Wyoming night creeping in. He knew with a certainty that settled deep in his gut that he couldn't leave her. His ranch, the Calloway Spread, was a good 15 miles ahead. The nearest town was 20 miles back the way he'd come. To leave her here was to sign her death warrant. The wolves or the cold would finish what her attackers had started. The decision was made before he even consciously thought it through. He scooped her up into his arms. She was light, frighteningly light, as if she hadn't had a square meal in a week. Her head lolled against the solid wall of his chest, and through the smell of dust and blood, he caught a faint, surprising scent of lavender. "You're safe now," he murmured, the words a rough promise against her hair, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "I've got you." Getting her onto Thunder was a clumsy affair, but he managed it, settling her in front of him on the saddle. He wrapped one strong arm securely around her waist, holding her slumped form against his. With his free hand, he scooped up the carpetbag and tied it to his saddle. Whatever her story was, whatever secrets that bag held, she would need it. The first stars were pricking the deep velvet of the sky when he finally saw the lights. the warm, welcoming glow from the windows of the Calloway Ranch. The main house stood solid and proud, a testament to a decade of his own sweat and blood. He'd built it with his own two hands after the war, a fierce determination driving him to create something permanent in this wild, untamed land. His foreman, Frank Lawson, a man as weathered and dependable as the Wyoming landscape itself, came out onto the porch as he approached, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Mr. Calloway, didn't expect you back till—" Frank's voice cut off abruptly as he saw the limp figure in Ryder's arms. "Good Lord, Ryder. What happened?" "Found her on the road," Ryder explained, his voice tight with exhaustion as he carefully dismounted, never letting go of his fragile burden. "Unconscious. No idea who she is or what put her there. Go get Mrs. Hawkins, Frank, and have someone see to Thunder." Frank nodded, his face grim, and hurried back inside. Ryder carried the woman up the porch steps, her weight a constant, unsettling reminder of the mystery he'd just brought into his home. She was still out cold, her breathing shallow but, thankfully, steady. In the yellow lamplight spilling from the doorway, her features were thrown into sharp relief, the dark sweep of her lashes against her pale cheeks. A tiny old scar at the corner of her mouth, a faint white line. She wasn't a girl. He could see that now. Maybe 25, with faint lines around her eyes that spoke of a life that hadn't been entirely easy. Mrs. Hawkins, his housekeeper, a woman with a heart as big as the territory, appeared in the doorway. Her eyes went wide. "Merciful heavens! Bring her in, Mr. Calloway. The blue guest room. It's ready." Ryder followed her up the wide staircase, his boots heavy on the wood. He'd brought strangers to the ranch before. Out here, hospitality wasn't just a kindness, it was a law of survival. But never like this. Never someone so broken, so silent. He laid her gently on the big bed in the blue room as Mrs. Hawkins turned down the covers. The simple act felt strangely intimate. "She needs a doctor," he said, his voice rough. Her skin had a grayish pallor under the lamplight that he didn't like. "I'll send Tom into town right away," Mrs. Hawkins replied, her capable hands already dabbing at the gash on the woman's temple with a clean cloth. "But it's a long ride, Mr. Calloway. Doc Murray won't get here till morning at the earliest." "Do what you can for her," Ryder said, turning to leave. "I'll check on her later." He stepped out into the hall, suddenly aware of the dried blood staining his own shirt, the deep weariness that had settled into his bones. The ride to Cheyenne had been long, the business there even longer. The damned cattle buyer had tried to cheat him, lowering his offer at the last second. It left Ryder with a sour choice: take less than his herd was worth, or drive them all the way to Denver. He'd told the man he'd think on it, but now this woman. A mystery dropped right into his lap. Who was she? Where did she come from? And why, as he washed up and changed his shirt downstairs, did he feel a fierce, almost primal urge to protect her? He poured himself a whiskey, the amber liquid a welcome burn in his throat, and sank into his worn leather chair by the fireplace. The flames danced and writhed, but offered no answers. He must have drifted off, the whiskey and the exhaustion finally claiming him, because the next thing he knew, a scream ripped through the silence of the house. It came from upstairs, from the blue room. He was on his feet in an instant, his glass crashing to the floor. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his hand slapping at his hip for the gun that wasn't there. The scream came again, sharp and terrified, just as he reached the landing. He burst through the door without knocking. The woman was sitting bolt upright in bed. Her eyes were wide, wild with a terror so profound it made the air in the room feel cold. She was clutching the blankets to her chest like a shield. Mrs. Hawkins was beside her, trying to soothe her, but the woman wasn't listening. Her panicked gaze flew to Ryder, and she shrank back. "Who are you?" she cried, her voice trembling. "Where am I? Please, please, don't hurt me." Ryder held up his hands, palms out, showing he meant no harm. "Easy now," he said, keeping his voice calm and even. "No one's going to hurt you. My name is Ryder Calloway. I found you by the road. You're at my ranch. You're safe." She looked around the room frantically, her breathing coming in ragged gasps, as if the solid walls of the room were closing in on her. "My bag," she whispered, her eyes darting everywhere. "Where is my bag?" "It's right here, dear," Mrs. Hawkins said, her voice a soft coo. She pointed to the carpet bag sitting on a nearby chair. "Nothing's been touched, I promise." The woman's gaze fixed on the bag, and some of the frantic terror seemed to recede, though the fear remained, a dark shadow in her eyes. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "How long have I been here?" "Just a few hours," Ryder told her. "It's past midnight. You were hurt. Do you remember what happened?" She raised a shaking hand to the bandage Mrs. Hawkins had placed on her temple, her eyes unfocused for a moment, looking at a memory only she could see. "The stagecoach," she said, her voice cracking. "I was on the stagecoach to Laramie. There were men. They stopped us. They had guns." Her voice broke on a sob. "They took everything. The strongbox. Everyone's valuables. One of them. He hit me. He hit me when I wouldn't give him my mother's locket." She looked at him, her eyes pleading. "After that, I don't remember anything." "The stagecoach robbery," Ryder said, a grim understanding dawning. "We heard talk of it in Cheyenne. They said 3 passengers were killed." Her face crumpled completely. "Mr. and Mrs. Thornton," she wept, burying her face in her hands. "They were so kind. They were going to see their son. And the driver, oh God, the driver, they shot him. He tried to fight back and they just shot him." Tears streamed through her fingers. Mrs. Hawkins moved to the bed, wrapping a comforting arm around her shuddering shoulders. "Then you're the only one," Ryder said quietly, the words hanging heavy in the air. "You're the only survivor." She nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "They must have thought I was dead, too. I remember one of them. I heard him say to just leave the bodies, that a patrol would find them eventually." Her voice suddenly hardened, a core of steel beneath the fear and grief. "They were laughing. As they rode away, they were laughing." "The sheriff will need to speak with you," Ryder said, his mind already calculating the new dangers. "You're a witness." Fear, sharp and immediate, flashed across her face again. "No," she whispered. "They'll kill me. If they find out I'm alive, they'll come for me. One of them, the leader, his bandana slipped, just for a second, but I saw his face." Ryder exchanged a heavy look with Mrs. Hawkins over the woman's bent head. A witness. The only witness to a triple murder. In Wyoming territory, that was as good as a death sentence. The law was a thin, fragile thing out here, and men like that had a way of making witnesses disappear. "You're safe here," he said, the words a vow. "We've sent for the doctor. He'll be here in the morning. For now, you need to rest." She nodded, the fight seeming to drain out of her all at once, leaving her looking impossibly fragile against the white pillows. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with exhaustion, "for saving my life." "Anyone would have done the same," he said, though he knew, and she knew, that it wasn't true. Not out here, not in this land where looking the other way was often the easiest way to stay alive. "I'm Serena," she added softly. "Serena Blackwood." "Try to get some sleep, Miss Blackwood," Ryder said, backing out of the room. As he and Mrs. Hawkins stepped into the hall, the housekeeper laid a hand on his arm. "That poor, poor girl. What an ordeal." "Yes," Ryder agreed, his gaze still fixed on the closed door. A witness, a woman named Serena, and a gang of laughing murderers who thought she was dead. His gut tightened. He had a terrible feeling her ordeal, and his, was just getting started. The sun rose clear and bright the next morning, a sharp contrast to the darkness of the previous night. Dr. Murray, a man whose gruff exterior hid a sharp mind and a kind heart, arrived just as breakfast was being cleared away. He spent a good 20 minutes upstairs with Serena before coming down to the study where Ryder was pacing impatiently. "Well?" Ryder demanded as the doctor entered. "How is she?" "She's a tough one," the doctor said, setting his worn leather bag on Ryder's desk. "Remarkably well, all things considered. The head wound is superficial, mostly shock and exhaustion. A few days of rest, some decent food, she'll be back on her feet." Ryder felt a wave of relief so strong it almost buckled his knees. "And her memory?" he asked. "She seemed clear last night." "Seems intact," Dr. Murray confirmed, peering at Ryder over the top of his spectacles. "Gave me a perfectly coherent and rather chilling account of the attack. She's a lucky woman, Calloway. A very lucky woman." He paused, his expression turning serious. "Sheriff Turner needs to be told. This robbery has the whole territory spooked." "I know," Ryder said, "but she's terrified. She saw one of their faces." The doctor's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Well, that complicates things. Makes her a valuable witness, but it also paints a target on her back. I'd keep her presence here quiet if I were you, at least until Turner can offer some real protection." After the doctor departed, Ryder went upstairs. He hesitated for a moment before knocking softly on the blue room's door. "Come in," a voice called out, surprisingly strong. He stepped inside and stopped short. She was sitting up in bed, propped against a mountain of pillows, her chestnut hair brushed out and falling in soft waves over her shoulders. The morning light from the window caught the red highlights in it. Without the blood and the grime, she was stunning. Her eyes, he realized with a jolt, were the color of green gold, like sunlight filtering through summer leaves. "Good morning, Miss Blackwood," he said, suddenly feeling rough and out of place in his dusty work clothes. "Dr. Murray tells me you're on the mend." "Thanks to you, Mr. Calloway," she replied, a faint smile touching her lips. "I've been lying here, trying to remember more, trying to make sense of it." Her brow furrowed. "The last thing I remember clearly is being thrown from the coach. I must have crawled away from the road somehow." "That would explain it," Ryder said, moving to the chair beside her bed. "The robbery was at least a mile from where I found you." Her hands twisted the edge of the bedsheet. "I was on my way to Laramie. I was hired to be the new school teacher. My letters of recommendation, my savings, they took everything." "Everything but your life," Ryder reminded her gently. Her head snapped up and her green-gold eyes flashed with a sudden fierce fire. "Yes, and I intend to make that count." That fire, that unexpected steel in her, resonated with something deep inside him. It was the same fire he'd felt after the war, the desperate need to build something meaningful out of ashes. "The doctor says you should rest for a few days," he said. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need. When you're ready, we can figure out what to do next." "You're too kind," she said, the fire softening. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." "There's no debt," he said simply. "Out here we look after our own. It's the only way." The small smile returned, and this time it transformed her face, lighting it from within. "Then I hope I'll have the chance to help you someday, Mr. Calloway." He felt a strange warmth spread through his chest at her words. Clearing his throat, he stood. "Mrs. Hawkins will bring you some breakfast. Is there anything else you need?" She hesitated for a moment. "Actually, yes. I feel trapped in this bed. If it's not too much trouble, I'd love to just sit by a window, to see the sky. Being shut in like this, it brings back the feeling of being in that coach." "Of course," he said immediately. There's a sitting room down the hall. It has a fine view of the mountains. When you feel strong enough to walk, I'll help you there." "I feel strong enough now," she declared, and before he could protest, she threw back the covers. She was wearing one of Mrs. Hawkins's voluminous nightgowns, which swallowed her slender frame. As she stood, she swayed, and he was at her side in an instant, offering his arm. She took it, her fingers gripping his forearm. Her touch was warm, and it sent an unexpected jolt through him. She was taller than he'd realized, the top of her head coming nearly to his chin. They walked slowly down the hallway, her leaning on him for support. The sitting room was flooded with morning sun, and she sank into a cushioned chair by the big window with a grateful sigh. "Oh, it's beautiful," she breathed, her eyes wide as she took in the view. The mountains rose in the distance, purple and majestic, and the rolling grasslands of his ranch spread out below like a map. "Your land," he said, unable to hide the note of pride in his voice. "As far as you can see, and then some. 3,000 acres. Built it up from just 500 over the last 10 years. You've made something incredible," she said, her gaze turning from the window to him. Her admiration felt genuine, and it pleased him more than he would have admitted. "Back home in Boston, a man's worth is measured by his family name. Out here, you measure it by what you can build with your own 2 hands." "And what about school teachers?" he asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. "How are they measured?" A shadow, quick as a passing cloud, crossed her face. "Education is valued differently everywhere. In Boston, it's a mark of status. In Laramie, I believe it's a necessity, a tool for survival in a changing world." "Is that why you came west? To bring education to the frontier?" She looked down at her hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. "Partly," she said, her voice quiet, "and partly to escape." The word hung in the air between them. It was a common story out here. The West was full of people running from something. A bad debt, a broken heart, a shadowed past. It was an unspoken rule that you didn't pry. "Well, you can stay here until you're ready to face what's next," he said, changing the subject. "We'll get word to the school in Laramie that you're safe." "Thank you, Mr. Calloway," she said softly, "for everything." He just nodded, but as he left her sitting there, silhouetted against the vast Wyoming landscape, he had the unsettling feeling that by bringing her here, he hadn't just saved her from the wilderness. He had invited it right into his home. And he wasn't sure he'd ever be the same. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm. Serena grew stronger, her color returning, the haunted look in her eyes slowly receding. She began taking her meals downstairs, her presence a quiet, welcome change to the masculine energy of the ranch house. She spent hours in Ryder's small library, devouring his books, and Ryder found himself making excuses to be near the house, to catch a glimpse of her, to exchange a few words. He told himself it was about her safety. He told himself he was just being a good host. But the truth was, he was captivated. She was smart, with a quick wit and strong opinions that she wasn't afraid to share. Their dinners became the highlight of his day, the conversation flowing easily from the price of cattle to the poetry of Keats. He found himself telling her things he hadn't spoken of in years, about the war, about his parents, about the lonely driving ambition that had pushed him to build this ranch from nothing. He was learning her, too, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed, the way she had a habit of biting her lower lip when she was thinking, the quiet determination that underlaid everything she did. A week after she arrived, he came back from a long day checking the north pasture to find her on the front porch. She had a book open on her lap, but she wasn't reading. Her gaze was fixed on the horizon, a thoughtful, distant expression on her face. She looked right, as if she belonged there, on his porch, looking out over his land. The thought was both pleasing and deeply unsettling. "You're looking well," he said, stopping at the bottom of the steps and taking off his hat. She looked up, and that smile, the one that always seemed to catch him off guard, lit up her face. "I feel well. The wound is almost completely healed." She closed the book. "I've been thinking, Mr. Calloway, it's time I stopped imposing on your hospitality." "You're not imposing," he said, maybe a little too quickly. "There's no rush. The school term in Laramie won't start for another month." "True," she said, "but I need to make arrangements. Let them know I'm still coming." She paused, her smile fading. "And I've been putting this off. The sheriff. He needs to be notified." Ryder came up the steps and sat on the porch swing beside her. The wood creaked companionably. "I sent a rider to Sheriff Turner 3 days ago," he admitted. "He's been tied up with some trouble in Laramie, but he's planning to ride out tomorrow to take your statement." Her face went pale. "Oh, I see. I suppose I should prepare myself." He saw the tremor in her hands and reached out, covering one of them with his own. Her skin was soft, a stark contrast to his calloused palm. "Serena," he said, the sound of her first name on his own lips feeling both strange and natural. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready. Turner is a good man. He can wait." She shook her head, her jaw setting in that stubborn line he was coming to recognize. "No, it's time. Those men, they murdered 3 innocent people. They deserve to be brought to justice, and I'm the only one who can make that happen." Her courage humbled him, even as a cold knot of dread formed in his stomach. He knew the risks. He knew what men like that were capable of. "I'll be here with you when he comes," he promised. "You won't have to face it alone." Her fingers curled around his, her grip surprisingly strong. "Thank you, Ryder." The way she said his name sent a warmth spreading through his veins that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. He looked down at their joined hands, then up into her incredible green-gold eyes. A current, silent and powerful, passed between them. It was a moment charged with unspoken words, with the potent awareness of a man and a woman who had been through fire together, and were now standing on the edge of something new. But the moment, fragile as it was shattered by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Ryder was on his feet in an instant, his hand dropping to his gun belt out of pure reflex. A lone rider was coming up the main track, his pace steady, deliberate. Not the hurried gallop of an emergency, but not the casual amble of a neighbor either. As the man drew closer, Ryder recognized him. "It's Deputy Wells," he said to Serena, his voice low. "He works for Sheriff Turner." The deputy reined in his horse, a cloud of dust settling around him. He touched the brim of his hat. "Mr. Calloway, ma'am." "Deputy," Ryder nodded, a frown creasing his brow. "Weren't expecting the sheriff till tomorrow." "Sheriff's still tied up," Wells said, swinging down from his horse. He was a tall, rangy man with pale, watchful eyes. "Sent me ahead to take a preliminary statement from the lady." He looked at Serena, his gaze lingering with an open curiosity that made Ryder's hackles rise. "You'd be Miss Blackwood, I take it." "The survivor." Serena stood, her hand slipping from Ryder's. "Yes, I am." "Perhaps you could come inside to talk," Ryder suggested, stepping slightly in front of her. He didn't like the way the deputy was looking at her, like a piece of meat he was sizing up. "Actually," Wells said, his gaze not leaving Serena, "I need to speak with Miss Blackwood alone. It's official business." "This is my house, Deputy," Ryder said, his voice flat and cold. "Miss Blackwood is my guest, and she is under my protection." "It's all right, Ryder," Serena said softly, placing a hand on his arm. She turned to the deputy. "We can use the sitting room if you'd like." Wells nodded, and Ryder, with a deep reluctance he couldn't explain, led them inside. As he turned to leave them alone, Serena met his eyes. She gave him a small, reassuring nod, but it did little to quell the unease coiling in his gut. He closed the door, but he didn't leave. He stayed in the hallway, straining to hear, a strange sense of foreboding washing over him. The murmur of voices from the sitting room went on for what felt like an eternity. 10 minutes. 15. Then the tone shifted. The voices grew louder. He could hear Serena's voice, sharp with distress, and the deputy's low and demanding. Ryder's hand was on the doorknob when the door was suddenly flung open from the inside. Serena stumbled out, her face a mask of chalky white terror. "Ryder!" she gasped, grabbing his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. "It's him! He's one of them!" Ryder didn't need to ask who. He pushed her behind him just as Deputy Wells appeared in the doorway, his hand already moving toward the gun on his hip. His pale eyes were no longer watchful. They were cold and flat, like a snake's. "Now that's a mighty serious accusation, Miss Blackwood," Wells said, his voice a low snarl, "the kind of accusation that can get a person killed." "You were there!" Serena cried from behind Ryder, her voice shaking but filled with a new terrible certainty. "You murdered those people! I recognize you, the scar on your jaw. When your bandana slipped, I saw it. And your voice. You were the one who told them to leave the bodies." Wells's hand closed around the butt of his pistol, but Ryder was faster. Years of living on the edge, where a split second was the difference between life and death, had honed his reflexes to a razor's edge. His own Colt was out of its holster and leveled at the deputy's chest before Wells's gun had even cleared leather. "Drop it, Wells," Ryder commanded, his voice deadly quiet. "Whatever game you're playing, it's over." "You're making a mistake, Calloway," Wells sneered, his gun still half drawn. "The woman's got a head injury. She's confused, seeing things that aren't there." "I said, drop it," Ryder repeated, the hammer of his Colt clicking back with an ominous finality. "Or I swear to God, I'll put a bullet through your black heart right here in my hallway." For a long, tense moment, the two men stood frozen. The air crackled with unspoken violence. Then, with a curse, Wells slowly, deliberately, let his gun drop to the floor. His lips twisted into a venomous sneer. "You're a dead man, Calloway. You and the little schoolteacher both. My friends aren't going to like this." "Your friends can join you in a cell," Ryder bit out. "Frank!" he bellowed, his voice echoing through the house. "Get in here! Now!" His foreman appeared at the end of the hall, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. "Frank, take his other gun and tie him up," Ryder ordered, never taking his eyes off Wells. "He's under arrest for triple murder." "You can't arrest me!" Wells spat, his face contorted with rage. "You're not the law!" "No," Ryder said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "But a citizen's arrest is legal in this territory when a felony has been committed, and I'm pretty sure murder counts." As Frank disarmed the struggling deputy and began tying his hands, Serena finally sagged against Ryder, the adrenaline that had fueled her courage giving way to the bone-deep shock of what had just happened. He caught her, his arm circling her waist, supporting her. "You're safe," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you." She looked up at him, her beautiful eyes swimming with tears. "He was going to kill me," she whispered. "He kept asking questions, trying to find out if I remembered, if I'd told anyone. When I mentioned the scar, I saw it in his eyes. He knew. He was reaching for his gun when I ran." Ryder knelt beside her as she sank into a chair, taking her cold hands in his. "You were brave, Serena. Incredibly brave." He looked toward the front door, where Frank was hauling a cursing Wells out onto the porch. The first part of the nightmare was over, but as he looked back at Serena's pale, terrified face, he knew the worst was yet to come. Wells had friends, and now they would be coming for the only witness who could send them all to the gallows. Night fell like a shroud over the ranch, heavy and silent. Ryder had his men posted around the property, trusted hands with rifles, their eyes scanning the darkness. Mrs. Hawkins, protesting fiercely, had been sent to her sisters in town for her own safety. The big house was eerily quiet, occupied only by Ryder, Serena, Frank, and another hand named Luke. Ryder stood by the darkened study window, his rifle cradled in his arms, the cool metal a familiar comfort. Serena sat in a chair near the fireplace, a small, elegant revolver resting on her lap. It had been his mother's. He'd spent a half-hour showing her how to use it, and her focus, her steady hand, had surprised him. "Do you think they'll come tonight?" she asked, her voice a low murmur in the quiet room. "Hard to say," Ryder answered, his gaze never leaving the moonlit yard. "Depends on how organized they are, but Wells has been missing for hours now. They'll know something's gone wrong." She was silent for a long moment. "I never properly thanked you," she said softly. "For everything. If you hadn't come along that road when you did—" "Let's not think about that," he said, turning from the window to look at her. In the soft glow of the single lamp, with her hair loose and the firelight dancing in her eyes, she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Serena," he began, taking a step toward her, "when this is all over, A sharp, piercing whistle from outside cut him off. The signal. His man on the east side had seen something. "Ryder's approaching," he said, his voice all business again. "Stay here. Lock this door behind me." "No," she said, standing up, the small revolver clutched in her hand. "I am not going to hide in a room while you risk your life for me. I can shoot. I can help." Before he could argue, a second whistle sounded, this one closer, more urgent. There was no time to debate. "All right," he conceded, recognizing the futility of arguing with that stubborn set of her jaw. "But you stay right behind me. And if I tell you to run, you run. No questions, understand?" She gave a single sharp nod. They moved like shadows through the darkened house to the front hall, where Luke was waiting. "4 of them," Luke whispered, his face grim. "Coming up the main road slow and quiet. They're armed for war." "Positions," Ryder snapped. "Jim's in the barn loft. Miguel is covering the south side. I was watching the north." "Good. Get back to your post. Signal if they split up." Luke nodded and melted back out a side door. Ryder moved to a front window, careful to stay in the shadows, out of the moonlight. Serena was right behind him, so close he could feel the warmth of her body. Her presence was a strange mix of comfort and a terrifying distraction. He could just make them out now, 4 dark shapes on horseback, moving with the unnatural stillness of predators. They stopped just outside the main yard, 100 yards out, conferring in low voices he couldn't quite hear. "They're trying to figure out how to play it," he murmured. "They don't know how many of us there are. They don't like the odds if we're waiting for them." "Will they just leave?" Serena whispered, her voice full of a hope he couldn't share. "No," he said, his gut tightening. "They'll try to draw us out, or they'll—" The word died in his throat as a flaming arrow arced silently through the night sky. It landed on the dry shingled roof of the barn with a soft thump. "Or they'll try to burn us out," he finished, his voice a grim whisper. The barn roof caught with terrifying speed. Flames, orange and angry, licked up toward the night sky. He saw Jim, his man in the loft, scramble out onto the roof, firing his rifle at the riders as he ran for the ladder. A volley of answering gunshots echoed across the yard. "We can't lose the barn," Ryder gritted out. "The horses are in there." As if in response, a second flaming arrow slammed into the wood of the front porch. A third hit the side of the house. "They're going to burn everything," Serena said, a note of horror in her voice. In that split second, Ryder's mind raced. The house, the barn, his men, Serena. He made a choice. "The kitchen pantry," he said, grabbing her arm. "There's a trap door to the root cellar. My father built a tunnel from there. It comes out by the creek. Go. Now." "I won't leave you," she cried, pulling against his grip. "Serena, listen to me," he said, turning her to face him, his hands gripping her shoulders. "If something happens to me, I need to know you got away. I need to know you're safe, please." Another arrow hit the roof directly over their heads with a sickening thud. The crackle of flames was getting louder, the smell of smoke thicker. "Go!" he urged. "I'll draw their fire. I'll come for you when it's safe." She stared at him for a heartbeat, her eyes wide and luminous in the flickering hellish light. Then she rose on her toes and pressed a quick, fierce kiss to his lips. "Be careful," she whispered against his mouth. And then she was gone, a fleeting shadow running toward the back of the house. Ryder watched her go for one precious, stolen second. The brief touch of her lips was a brand on his. Then the roar of the fire and the crack of rifles pulled him back to the nightmare. He moved to the side of the house, using the growing chaos as cover. He could see Miguel pinned down behind a water trough, exchanging shots with two of the attackers who had taken cover behind a wagon. Jim had made it to the woodpile but was trapped there. Luke was nowhere in sight. Ryder raised his rifle, took a steadying breath, and squeezed the trigger. One of the men behind the wagon cried out and fell, clutching his shoulder. That gave Miguel the opening he needed. He scrambled from behind the trough and made a mad dash for the barn, disappearing into the smoke, no doubt trying to get the terrified horses out. Ryder stepped out onto the porch, firing again, forcing the remaining attackers back. A bullet whined past his ear, close enough to feel its heat, and he dove behind a thick rain barrel. Just then, Luke burst from the shadows on the attacker's flank. He got off two quick shots, dropping another man, before a third rider wheeled his horse and fired. Luke went down, grabbing his leg. A white-hot rage, cold and pure, flooded Ryder. They had come to his home. They had threatened Serena. They had shot his men. He strode forward, away from his cover, firing methodically, the rifle bucking against his shoulder. He was no longer just defending his property. He was attacking. He drove the last two uninjured men back, but one of them was circling, moving toward the rear of the house, toward the kitchen, toward Serena. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "Jim!" he roared. "Cover me!" He didn't wait for an answer. He ran, sprinting across the yard toward the back of the house, bullets kicking up dirt around his feet. He rounded the corner just in time to see the kitchen door, which Serena must have left ajar, swing shut. He was inside. The man was inside the house with her. Ryder didn't hesitate. He burst through the kitchen door into a wall of smoke. The fire was spreading across the roof now, eating the dry timber. The pantry door was wide open. He could hear sounds from below, the scrape of a boot on the earthen floor, a muffled curse. "Serena!" he yelled, his voice raw with a fear greater than any he had ever known. No answer. But then a single gunshot, small and sharp, echoed up from the root cellar. It was followed by a scream. Her scream. He launched himself through the pantry and down the narrow steps, his rifle at the ready. The cellar was dark, lit only by the hellish orange glow from the burning kitchen above, and in that flickering light, he saw them. Serena was backed against the far wall, the small revolver clutched in both hands, aimed at the attacker. The man was stalking toward her, a bloody stain spreading on his arm where she must have shot him. He raised his own gun to finish her. Ryder fired. The rifle's blast was deafening in the enclosed space. The attacker was thrown backward, a puppet with its strings cut, and crumpled to the dirt floor. "Ryder!" Serena cried, her voice breaking as she ran to him. "The house! It's burning down!" "The tunnel," he said, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward the far wall, where a set of rough-hewn planks marked a hidden door. "It'll get us out." Above them, a massive beam cracked and gave way with a deafening roar. Smoke poured down the cellar steps. He wrenched the old door open, revealing a dark, narrow passage. "Go!" he yelled over the noise. "I'm right behind you!" She scrambled into the tunnel without a word, and he followed, pulling the heavy door shut just as the cellar ceiling began to collapse. The darkness in the tunnel was absolute. It was cramped and musty, the earthen walls pressing in on them. They stumbled forward, feeling their way, the sounds of their home's destruction fading behind them. After what felt like an eternity of blind scrambling, their hands found another door. Ryder pushed it open, and they fell out into the cool night air, onto the bank of the creek a quarter-mile from the house. They turned and looked back. The night sky was lit a sickening orange. His home, the house he had built with his own hands, the symbol of his entire life's work, was a raging inferno. "Oh, Ryder," Serena whispered, her hand finding his in the darkness. "I'm so sorry." Before he could answer, they heard hoofbeats. They both tensed, but then Miguel's voice called out from the darkness. He and Jim were leading the horses, their faces smudged with soot, but they were alive. "Mr. Calloway!" Miguel shouted, his voice thick with relief. "We thought you were trapped inside." "We got out through the tunnel," Ryder explained, his eyes still fixed on the fire. "Where's Luke?" "He made it," Jim said. "Leg's busted up bad, but he'll live. We left him at the old line shack." "And the attackers?" Ryder asked, his voice hard. "2 dead, 1 wounded bad, but the 4th one, he got away," Jim reported grimly. "And Wells?" Ryder's heart sank. "Escaped," Miguel said, spitting on the ground. "In all the chaos, shot Davy when he tried to stop him." "Davy's hit?" "Alive," Miguel said, "but it ain't good. We sent Pedro for the doc and the sheriff." Ryder stood there, taking it all in. His home was gone. 2 of his men were badly wounded, and Wells, the snake who had started all this, was still out there. He looked at Serena, standing beside him, ash in her hair, her face streaked with soot, but her eyes, even in the dark, were fixed on him, full of a fierce, unwavering strength. She was safe. In the midst of all this loss, that was the one thing that mattered. "We're going to the line shack," he said, his voice ringing with a resolve he didn't know he possessed. "We can defend it. We'll regroup there." As they mounted up and rode away from the burning ruins of his past, Ryder felt a strange and terrible clarity. He had lost everything he had built. But as he looked at the woman riding beside him, he knew with absolute certainty that he had just found the one thing worth fighting for. And the war was far from over. The line shack was a crude, one-room cabin 3 miles from the main ranch, little more than a temporary shelter for his hands. But it was built of solid logs with a stone fireplace, and its small windows could be defended. Inside, Luke was lying on a makeshift pallet, his face pale with pain. Davy was worse off, his breathing shallow and ragged as Miguel tried to tend to a nasty bullet wound in his chest. Ryder paced the small space like a caged wolf. He felt a seething, helpless rage. "You should get some rest," he told Serena. She was kneeling by the fire helping Jim make coffee, her movements calm and efficient, despite everything she'd been through. "So should you," she shot back, her eyes meeting his. She gestured to the dark bruise forming on his temple from a knock he'd taken in the tunnel. "I doubt any of us will sleep much tonight." She was right. They took turns standing watch at the windows, their rifles ready. The long night dragged on, filled with the sounds of Davy's pained breathing and the crackle of the fire. As the first hint of gray light began to touch the eastern sky, Ryder found himself standing watch next to Serena. They shared a rough wool blanket against the pre-dawn chill. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice quiet. "We rebuild," Ryder said, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "I did it once, I can do it again." She looked at him, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "After the war," he explained, "I came back here to nothing. My parents were gone. The old homestead was falling apart. I built everything you saw from the ground up." "And Wells?" she asked. "What about him and his gang?" Ryder's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. "They won't stop. Not while you're alive to identify them." "Then I should leave," she said, the words clearly costing her. "Go somewhere they'll never find me." "No," he said, his voice firm, resolute. Running isn't the answer. We end this. For good. She studied his face, the hard lines and the exhaustion etched there. You have a plan. The beginnings of one, he admitted. But it's dangerous. I won't ask you to be a part of it. It's too late for that, Ryder, she said, her hand finding his beneath the blanket. I'm already a part of it, and I'm not running away. Not now. The quiet determination in her voice echoed the feeling that had been growing in his own heart, a feeling that was as terrifying as it was undeniable. He turned his hand, his fingers lacing with hers. When I found you on that road, he said, his voice dropping to a low murmur, I had no idea I was finding this. Trouble? She asked, a ghost of a smile on her lips as she glanced at their wounded men. I seem to have brought nothing but trouble to your door. No, he said, turning to face her fully, the blanket falling away. You brought something else. Courage, strength, and a reason to fight that has nothing to do with land or cattle. Her eyes widened slightly, and in their depths, he saw a reflection of the powerful emotion churning inside him. He opened his mouth to say more, to put a name to the feeling, but the sound of approaching riders cut the moment short. He was at the window in a flash, his rifle up. Serena was right beside him, her small revolver raised. In the gray dawn light, he saw a group of horsemen, at least a half-dozen of them, riding toward the shack. At their head was a man he recognized. It's the sheriff, Ryder said, a wave of relief washing over him. The real one this time. Sheriff Turner swung down from his horse, his face a grim mask as he took in the scene. Calloway, he grunted, his eyes moving from Ryder's battered face to the wounded men inside the shack. We got your man Pedro's message. Looks like we missed the party. Better late than never, Ryder said dryly. Wells got away, but we got 2 of his men dead back at the ranch. Turner's face darkened. Wells, I trusted that man. Never saw it coming. He looked past Ryder to Serena. This must be Miss Blackwood. Yes, Sheriff, she said, stepping forward, her voice clear and steady. I can identify Deputy Wells as one of the robbers. He tried to kill me to keep me quiet. So we gathered, Turner said. Well, miss, that makes you the most important person in this territory right now, and the most endangered. She'll give you a full statement, Ryder said, stepping closer to Serena. But not until Wells and his crew are either dead or in chains. They'll come back for her, Sheriff. They have to. Turner nodded slowly, stroking his graying beard. You're right. I've got 6 men with me, and the territorial marshal is on his way from Cheyenne with a posse. But Wells knows this country. He could be halfway to Mexico by now. No, Ryder said, an idea beginning to form, sharp and dangerous in his mind. He won't run. Not yet. Not while she's still a threat. He'll go somewhere he feels safe, somewhere he has friends. He looked at the sheriff, his eyes glinting. Sheriff, how fast can you get a message to Laramie? The plan was audacious. A high-stakes gamble with Serena's life as the prize. By noon, riders had been dispatched with carefully worded messages. The wounded men, along with the doctor who had finally arrived, were moved to an abandoned, more defensible homestead a few miles away. As they settled in, Serena turned to Ryder, her eyes full of worry. Are you sure this will work? No, he admitted honestly. But it's the best shot we have. Wells has to believe we're moving you to Cheyenne for your protection. He has to believe you'll be on that main road. So he'll try to ambush the escort, she finished, understanding dawning, while I'm actually here, waiting for him. With me, Ryder confirmed, and half of the sheriff's men. The other half will be on the main road, escorting an empty wagon with a woman's bonnet left on the seat, plain as day. Sheriff Turner approached them, a telegram in his hand. Marshal's on his way. Should be here by morning. Good, Ryder said. By then this will all be over, one way or another. As evening fell, the tension in the old Mason homestead became a palpable thing. The sheriff's men were in position, silent and watchful. Ryder cleaned and rechecked his weapons for the 10th time, a nagging feeling of unease chewing at him. He felt like he was missing a piece of the puzzle. "What is it?" Serena asked, sensing his agitation. "You don't think he'll take the bait?" "I'm not sure," Ryder confessed. "Wells is no fool. He was a lawman. He knows how we think. He might suspect a trap." "Then what would he do?" "If he suspected a trap," Ryder thought aloud, "he'd try to confirm where you are. Send a scout, maybe. Or—" He trailed off, a chilling realization dawning on him. His blood ran cold. Or he'd have someone on the inside, someone who could tell him the real plan. He turned, his eyes sweeping over the men in the room, the sheriff's deputies, his own loyal hands. Who? Who knew the details? Who could be the traitor? Before he could even form the accusation, a single shot rang out from the darkness outside. Then another. They weren't on the main road. They were here. "They're here!" Sheriff Turner roared, diving for the window. "6 of them, maybe more, coming from the west!" The trap hadn't just failed. It had been reversed. Wells knew. He'd known all along. "We have a traitor!" Ryder yelled to the sheriff as they took positions at the windows. The air suddenly filled with the whistle of bullets and the splintering of wood. "Someone told him!" Turner's face was a mask of fury. "We'll sort that out later. Right now, we fight!" The gun battle was savage. Wells and his men had them surrounded, pouring a relentless fire into the small house. 2 deputies went down in the first few minutes. Ryder kept Serena behind him, firing methodically, trying to make every shot count. "We need to get her to the root cellar," Turner shouted over the deafening roar of the guns. Just then, a bullet shattered the window next to Ryder, and a shard of glass sliced Serena's cheek. She cried out but didn't flinch, her small revolver held steady in her hand. "I am not hiding again!" she yelled, her voice ringing with fierce defiance. Ryder glanced at her, his heart torn between terror for her and a profound admiration. "Ryder, look out!" she suddenly screamed and shoved him hard. As he stumbled, she raised her revolver and fired past his head, toward the inside of the room. He spun around to see Collins, one of the sheriff's youngest deputies, leveling a pistol at Sheriff Turner's back. Serena's shot had missed, but it made Turner turn. The sheriff fired without hesitation. Collins collapsed, a look of shocked betrayal on his young face. "The traitor," Turner said, his voice laced with venom. "Wells's cousin. I should have known." Outside, the attack intensified. Through the smoke and chaos, Ryder saw him. Wells, crouched behind a water trough, directing his men, his face contorted in a triumphant snarl. Seeing him, the man responsible for all of this filled Ryder with a cold, clear rage that burned away all fear. "Cover me," he said to Turner, and before the sheriff could protest, he was out the back door, melting into the dusk. He moved like a ghost, using the shadows, his knowledge of the terrain giving him an advantage. The raging gunfight at the front of the house masked the sound of his approach as he circled around behind the attacker's position. He got closer, close enough to hear Wells's voice barking orders. "Flush them out! Burn the place down, but I want the woman! She's the only one who can finger us!" Ryder raised his rifle, the metal cool and steady against his cheek. He centered the sight on Wells's back. "It's over, Wells," he called out, his voice ringing with authority. Wells spun, his gun coming up, a look of pure shock on his face. Ryder fired. The shot caught Wells in the shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him to the ground. Before he could recover, Ryder was on him, kicking his pistol away, the barrel of his own rifle pressed hard against the man's chest. "Give me one reason," Ryder growled, his entire being screaming at him to pull the trigger, to end it, to deliver the justice this man deserved. Wells, clutching his shattered shoulder, actually managed a bloody sneer. "You won't do it, Calloway. You're too righteous to kill a man in cold blood. Try me, Ryder whispered, his finger tightening on the trigger. He saw it all in a flash. The murdered passengers, his burning home, his wounded men, Serena's terrified face. Justice demanded it. Ryder, don't! Serena's voice. She was standing a few feet behind him, her face pale in the moonlight. Go back inside, Serena, he ordered, his voice tight, his eyes never leaving Wells. This isn't for you. If you kill him like this, she said, her voice pleading, then you become him. Let the law handle it. Please, Ryder, for me. The law. He almost laughed. Wells was the law, but her voice, her plea, cut through the red haze of his rage. Slowly, reluctantly, he took a step back. He kept the rifle aimed at Wells's heart, but the immediate killing pressure was gone. You're under arrest, Wells, he said, his voice like ice. Sheriff Turner and his remaining men appeared out of the darkness, their guns trained on the surviving outlaws. It's over, Calloway, the sheriff said, his voice heavy with relief. The marshal's posse cut off the rest of them trying to run. We got 'em all. As Turner's men hauled the snarling, wounded Wells to his feet, Ryder finally lowered his rifle and looked at Serena. There was a small, bloody cut on her cheek, but her eyes were clear. You saved me, he said quietly, from becoming him. I think, she said, stepping toward him until they were almost touching, we saved each other. You gave me a place to hide, protection from monsters. But you also gave me something else, something I never expected to find in this wild country. What's that? He asked, his heart hammering against his ribs. A home, she said simply. A place where I belong. Someone to belong with. Around them, the chaotic aftermath of the battle was unfolding. Men were shouting, tending to the wounded. But for Ryder, the world had shrunk to the space between him and this incredible woman. My home is a pile of ashes, he reminded her gently. A home isn't just wood and nails, Ryder, she said, her hand coming up to touch his cheek. It's people, it's safety, it's love. The word hung between them, a fragile, powerful thing. He didn't need any more words. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, a kiss that was not about passion or relief, but about a deep and profound recognition, a kiss that sealed a promise made in fire and blood. When he finally pulled back, he looked into her eyes. I love you, Serena Blackwood, he said, the truth of it settling in his soul. I think I have since the moment I found you on that road. And I love you, Ryder Calloway, she answered, her smile so bright it outshone the rising moon. Enough to face down outlaws and fires and anything else this territory wants to throw at us. He held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, the smell of wood smoke and lavender. The fight was over. The monsters were caged. And in the ruins of his old life, a new one was just beginning. 3 months later, a new house stood on the rise overlooking the valley. It was smaller than the one he'd lost, but it was solid, built with the help of neighbors who had come from miles around after hearing his story. The barn was repaired, his herd was slowly being rebuilt, and Wells and his gang had been tried and sentenced to hang. Serena had testified, her voice clear and strong, her courage inspiring the entire territory. The school in Laramie had held the teaching position for her, but she had politely declined. She had found her place. One crisp autumn morning, Ryder stood on the porch of their new home, a cup of coffee steaming in his hands, watching the sun paint the mountains. The door opened behind him. You're up early, Serena said, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind and resting her head against his back. Couldn't sleep, he said, leaning into her embrace. Too much to think about. Second thoughts about marrying a penniless school teacher? She teased. Not a single one, he said, turning in her arms to face her. In fact, I've never been more certain of anything. He reached into his pocket, and pulled out a small velvet box he'd ridden all the way to Cheyenne for. He dropped to one knee on the new porch planks. "Serena Blackwood," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You walked into my life out of the dust and chaos and showed me what it truly means to build something. You are my home. Will you be my wife?" Tears welled in her eyes, but her smile was radiant. "Yes, Ryder Calloway. With all my heart, yes." He slipped the simple gold ring on her finger and rose to kiss her as the sun crested the mountains, bathing their new beginning in a flood of golden light. A year passed. The ranch thrived. Serena had started her own small school in a room they added to the house, teaching the children of ranchers from all over the valley. Their life was hard, but it was good, filled with the quiet satisfaction of building something together. Then one spring evening, Ryder came in from the pastures to find Serena on the porch, holding a letter, a strange, secret smile on her face. "It's from my cousin in Boston," she said. "She's coming to visit, and she's bringing my mother." Ryder was stunned. Serena had told him how her family had disowned her for coming west. "And that's not all," she said, her smile widening. She took his rough, calloused hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "By the time they arrive, there will be another Calloway here to greet them." The world seemed to stop for a moment. He stared at her, then at her stomach, the truth dawning on him with the force of a physical blow. A baby, their baby. Joy, pure and overwhelming, surged through him. He swept her up into his arms, spinning her around in a circle, his laughter echoing across the valley. They had faced death and destruction, and from the ashes they had built a life, a home, a family. And as the sun set over their Wyoming paradise, he held his wife close, a future he never dared to dream of, held safe in his arms. It was a story born of violence and luck on a desolate road, a story of a rancher, a survivor, and a love strong enough to rebuild a world from scratch. If you enjoyed this story of the Wild West and the unexpected turns a life can take, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of darkness, survival, and the strange twists of fate.